Hello everyone and good afternoon. My name is Heather Seeger and I'm the Interim Executive Director here at the Martha's Vineyard Museum. I want to thank you for joining us tonight for our program, Mystery into Order, Cabinets of Curiosity and the Urge to Collect. We'd like to begin first by acknowledging and paying our respect to the Wampanoag tribe on whose ancestral land the museum now sits. For those of you who don't know, the museum is now open Tuesday to Sunday, 10 to 5. You do need to book your timed entry on our website, and we hope that you can come and visit, especially if you haven't seen Lucy's exhibit yet. More on that in a moment. But I first also want to encourage you to join the museum as members. Members are truly the lifeblood of everything that we do here, from exhibits to programs, from providing lesson plans to island school children, to working with Arts MV to create the vote. Membership gives you unlimited access to the museum throughout the year, and an inside track and first peek at everything happening here. When we decided to reopen our museum in August, a big question was how to think about exhibits that would be meaningful to the community after 6 months in virtual lockdown. And when I first heard that we were doing something with Lucy Mitchell, I was excited that such a distinguished island artist was going to shepherd us back into history and culture. Personally, I felt like I needed an artist to hold my hand and bring me gently back into public spaces, to reopen my eyes to the good and the beautiful after so many months of worry and uncertainty. And the first time I walked through Lucy's exhibition, which is called Recollection, a personal museum in our Waggaman Gallery, it was like taking a deep, restorative breath. What struck me most were the tiny pebbles that were in a sort of conversation with the illuminated manuscripts next to them. The entire exhibit is an incredible reminder of the beauty that's all around us when we slow down and take the opportunity to really see. So tonight, we're lucky enough to get a chance to hear a conversation between Lucy and our chief curator, Bonnie Stacy, to hear more about the process of creating this magnificent exhibit and going all the way back to the beginnings of what we think of as museums. There'll be time at the end for all of you to post your questions for discussion, so please add them either to the chat or to the Q&A. And I'm pleased now to turn it over and introduce Lucy Mitchell. Hi, Lucy.
Hello.
And Bonnie Stacy. Hi, Bonnie.
Hey.
Off you go.
Okay, so I'm going to start you off with a slideshow of some really cool things. When I was first thinking about this particular topic, of course, it was because of Lucy's exhibit, but being in the museum field for a long time, you know, we kind of understand sort of where we come from, but it was a lot of fun to go back and look at some of the pictures of the earliest stuff. But this is by no means a comprehensive study. It's kind of quirky. It's kind of, you know, things that I like and ideas that I've had. And, you know, so first of all, the term cabinets of curiosity is an interesting one, I think. You know, but these particular exhibits had a bunch of different names. They were Wunderkammer, Kunstkammer, those were the German words, Cabinet of Wonders, art, and Cabinet of Curiosities, and in Italy, it was called a studiolo. But they generally had a lot of the same things in them. What is a curiosity? You know, I think it's something that you know, it's kind of changed when you think about curios and these little tiny things that maybe your grandmother collected or something like that. But in fact, in the terms that we're talking about here, a curiosity is like a strange or unusual object, a wonder, and the term cabinet can also be misleading because we think of it as a piece of furniture, but it could be a room, a closet, you know, or on the other hand, it could be a box. And so the word encompasses a lot and it holds a lot of objects. It could. So I was looking around for different descriptions of cabinets of curiosity. You can see the one on the screen here, which is an example of one that was published. This illustration was published in 1599. So this was a Renaissance sort of. They really came into their own during the Renaissance era. They displayed encyclopedic collections of amazing and often unfamiliar objects from many places and made out of many different materials. But as one author put it, this arrangement seems to have generated wonder and amazement, but little insight. And indeed, though museums originated with these rooms chock full of thousands of things that required erudite guides in person, and you can see in many of the old engravings like this one, people pointing to different objects and perhaps expounding upon them. Modern museums usually try to offer interpretive exhibits where the visitor can come in and they don't need extra help to see what, to understand the things that are in them. So this is sort of an evolution, but with, as with so many changes, you gain some things and you lose some things. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit about that. This particular cabinet of curiosity or studiolo was by a fellow named Ferrante Imperiato, who was from Naples, and he was an apothecary. So unlike a lot of the people who had as rich as many of the the early people who had these cabinets, but according to estimates, he had as many as 35,000 specimens in his collection. So pretty impressive. And here's another example. This one was Francesco Calzolari, and his description was published in 1622. That's when this was published. But if you look at the combination of natural and man-made objects in this, that is it's a consistent throughout this particular type of thing. You can look at all of the sort of the taxidermy animals along the top. And then if you look, there are specimen drawers with many things in them. And you can also see man-made things, jars and other things, obelisks down at the end. So there's a lot in here. And here is another one. This is a really famous one. And it's the cabinet of, I believe his name was pronounced Olivome, and he was a Dane. And you can see the same sort of thing, the natural pieces and some exotic pieces. And I think that's one of the things that I wanted to mention. These particular collections began around the same time as sort of the age of exploration and the age of, when Europeans were going out and doing the colonization of areas that were not Europe. And it's almost like the original sin of museums is the idea of going places and taking things that don't belong to them and then bringing them back and putting them in a room and making up your own stories about them. And so it's one of those things that we are still grappling with even now, because it's it can be really disrespectful to the cultures that made the things in the first place. And so I wanted to mention that. It's not something I'm necessarily going to dwell on, but I think as you look in some of these engravings and pictures, you can see that some of the things that are there, maybe shouldn't be there. One of the, as so many things, when you're talking about, anything from home decoration to the way you dress, showing off your wealth and status was part of the whole thing. And these were generally private collectors or nobility, people who had a lot of money. And so they would put these things together, and they would do, sometimes if they were scholars, or they would do these wonderful multi-volume books to describe them, or else they would hire a scholar to do that. And you can see that some of these, this is from the particular book, which is all in Latin. As we go through, you'll see so many, all the way through to the very newest one, Lucy's, the shells and things like that, that sort of always seem these particular arrangements. The arrangements are ways to do them, and they can and they really depend on the ideas, the focus of the people who collected them and what they found particularly interesting. And so how they can be beneficial or benign, neutral, or they can be harmful, as I mentioned before. I don't think the people who were making them realized the sort of damage that could be done by collecting the way that they were collecting, but it was definitely something that we should think about. Another thing that I wanted to show in this particular image, which you'll sort of see more of as we move along, is if you look at the top, I'm not sure whether my cursor, no, you look at the top left, there is an animal up there that is a sort of a composite animal. It's got wings and it's got a tail. It's sort of some kind of fish-bird combination. And this was something that often showed up in these cabinets of curiosities, fantastical beasts. And so if you sort of look around the room, you can see that even things that are not supposed to be man-made, they're obviously man-made. There are no animals that look like this. But back when these were first kind of put together, it wasn't always clear what the fake animals were as opposed to the real animals. And I remember hearing a story, which may be apocryphal, but I'm going to tell it anyway, about when the duck-billed platypus was first found in Australia, and a specimen was brought back, dead specimen was brought back. People were skeptical about whether that was a real animal, because it's such a weird combination of fur and bill. So anyway, that was that's sort of one of the themes that you see as we go through here. Another thing is that this was sort of when things like the scientific method were beginning to get developed, but when it first started, ideas like alchemy were very people thought that you could turn things from one thing into another thing, and so these things that might be considered pseudoscience now were definitely thought of as a possibility then. And so a lot of people who had these also had these ideas about alchemy and other things. This I included because it is so cool. It's in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and it's a studiolo from the Ducal Palace in Gubbio. And you can see that this is the late 1400s. It's made of intarsia, and so it's actually kind of a trompe-l'oeil collection of what would be in a nobleman's studiolo, but it's actually itself a work of art. It's all made out of different kinds of wood. And if you haven't been to the Met to see it, I really recommend that you go. It's a small little room, and it's absolutely lovely. So these particular cabinets of curiosity were sometimes actual pieces of furniture, cabinets that had these drawers that were filled with wonderful thing and tiny little works of art on the front of them. This one is, this one's called a Kunstschrank, which is an art cabinet. And this particular painting was this cabinet being delivered to the court of Philip II, Duke of Pomerania in 1612. And the cabinet was made by Philip Heinhofer. And he was a merchant, a banker, a diplomat, and an art collector. And he made these. There are a couple left in existence, I think. This particular one, I think, was destroyed at the end of World War II, but it's a really kind of elaborate form. Often it would have that at the top of it, there would be this, small sculpture made out of gold, and goldsmiths were major contributors to these particular works. Here's another example of, it's a painting of one of these cabinets, and you can just sort of see an idea of the combination of art and nature that was often combined in these particular places. And these are artifacts, that combine the natural and the man-made. I put the nautilus shell, the natural one, in there just to remind you of what they actually look like when they haven't been messed with. And these, basically they did them up strong. They took these natural objects and they just put all of the gilding and the sculpture around them. And here are some that are made out of bezoar stones, which I found out about when I was studying art history, but I guess everybody else found out about them from Harry Potter. But they were really thought to cure poison, so as an antidote for poisoning. They didn't work, as one poor test subject discovered to his pain and ultimate death, but they were thought to be poison antidotes. And you can see the same kind of combination of art and nature that bezoar stones are basically natural concretions that form in the guts of ruminants, I believe, like goats and animals like that, and they were highly prized. Another thing that you often will find in cabinets of curiosity are these sort of, either sculptures or taxidermy animals doing bizarre things. This one is from a Kunstkammer in Vienna, and you can sort of see he's dressed up as a hunter. I pulled a couple of, there's a piece of, here's another sort of thing that is also these, I call them relics, but they're basically just things that you pick up someplace and you keep the note with it to tell you where you got it. Museums are full of these, and so are cabinets of curiosity. And people will, sort of save them to remind them of their travels, and often they fit into these places. We have them here at the Martha's Vineyard Museum. This is a piece of the city of Columbus shipwreck, and when bits of the ship washed up on the shore, they were collected, and people, made a note of what it was from, and sold them as mementos of that particular tragedy. And then it came to the museum. We have a couple of these, and it's sort of, I see it as a continuation of the long tradition of, you take this one small thing to remind you of something else and to start a story, and it's basically a relic. Very common in cabinets of curiosity. When we get to the United States, the first museum was Wilson Peel's museum, Charles Wilson Peel's museum, which was opened in 1786. And he was an artist himself, a portraitist. And this is a self-portrait that he did showing off his museum. He had a lot of things like birds, natural. He has sort of put his attributes in the front of the painting. His palette and brushes, mammoth bone. That was a big deal in his museum was the mammoth. And he was also one of the early people to adopt the Linnaean taxonomy. So we're really talking about putting things in order, in scientific order, and often that ended up being the arrangement, as we went along, that people would who were setting up these rooms would use. And his museum ultimately was not successful. His sons, I think, tried to take it over, but it ended up, much of the collection was purchased by P.T. Barnum. And Barnum was, as most of you know, he had the circus, he had these freak show type things, and this was this was sort of a forerunner to that. It was something that he had, and this is his mermaid. It's called the Fiji mermaid. This was not his. His went up in flames when the museum burned in 1865. This one's in the Harvard Peabody Museum, but it's one of those odd composite animals, fanciful animals that I was talking about before. And there are quite a few of these, and so you can see there was a combination of the real and the silly. This is from Barnum's Guidebook, and so he had living animals. He had this Portuguese man of war. I'm not exactly sure how he exhibited that, but then he also had the apes with the with the firearms, and that's a thing, as you can see here. And I just went and collected. People like to do this. They put their taxidermy or their funny sculptures into weird positions, and they put them in their rooms. And for some reason, animals fighting each other was one of those things that definitely people like to do. This one, of course, on the right is very recent because it's a lightsaber fight, like from Star Wars, but with squirrels. As I mentioned, the Barnum Museum went up in flames, and there were all these stories about the animals escaping and having to be killed. Some of them are true and some of them are not. He supposedly had a couple of whales that were their tank, the glass burst and the whales died in this fire. It's really horrible, horrible story. But that was sort of one of the, the early museums. And then, of course, it sort of evolved into his strange, he sort of ran with the whole strange animal, weird, people kind of story. But museums kind of grew out of this idea of take a whole bunch of stuff and put them in the room and let people think about them themselves. This is the Mercer Museum in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, and it kind of has that same idea, except with tools and farming equipment and nautical equipment. And it's sort of, it still exists, and it almost still exists here at the Martha's Vineyard Museum. We didn't actually design this to be a cabinet of curiosities, except that It's a sort of the open storage area idea of museums almost has that feel about it as well. And, you know, if you go to some museums where they have open storage, you can sort of get that impression. We keep trying to add, and, you know, signage, and, you know, we'll probably have, you know, we're adding more that will tell what these things are, because obviously it's not intuitive, but that's part of the, you know, part of the process of putting this all together. There's another view. It's also the one behind me, but I'm not in that view. So, and then the other thing is the Cabinet of Curiosities sort of as an aesthetic. This sort of people, you know, it is something that people like the look of, and there are, you know, some people have these in their homes and they collect the same sort of thing. This is actually, you know, from a website where someone sells those same kind of materials that always have appeared in these traditional cabinets of curiosity. And so, you know, it's another thing that is kind of out there. And then I put this in here because so many of us are collectors, and this is a photograph. And it was just taken last year, and the title of the photograph is His Treasures. And you know, so many of us have wonders of our own in our homes, and we like to show them to people who come and visit us as a natural thing that we do. The photographer mentioned that the person in this photograph is holding one of his favorite Kachina dolls, a white wolf, and as he went around the house showing me some of his treasures. After his wife and best friend passed away in 2010, his collections have slowly taken over the house that she used to keep tidy. And so this is sort of, you know, something that it really spoke to me as these things become very important to people as they live with them. So now I'm going to move into the world of art, and artists have really taken to this idea as a way to express themselves, either well, always artistically, sometimes politically, sometimes introspectively. There are a number of different artists, and they have different sort of uses for the particular form. This is André Breton in his studio in Paris, I believe, and this is a sort of a surrealist interpretation of the Cabinet of Curiosities. Here is another one. This one is an exhibit of surrealist objects at Charles Raton's May 1936 studio. And on the right is a piece called Aphrodisiac, a Dinner Jacket. This is from 1936. And then, you know, that looks like Marcel Duchamp's ready-made bottle rack there in the middle, which was sort of Dada, proto-Dada piece from 1914. And so this was sort of an assemblage of more recent objects, but sort of in the form of a cabinet of curiosity. This is by an artist named Alice Padavani, and she has collected objects and natural things, but mounted them as if they are all natural specimens. You can see that she is drawn in this example to things that have similar color, for example. And here's another piece that is sort of in the same line. And so, but you know, you can see it's sort of beautiful gathered together, but if you look at the individual pieces or individual objects, There's like a key and a nail, and it's the artist's arrangement that has really given them their power. But it, it also, especially if you look at those old engravings that we saw sort of at the beginning, you can see that the similarity of appearance between the two things. And this one I thought was particularly interesting. This was very recent. I think it was just last year. A German artist named Natasha Kelly, who was doing a project for an advanced German-speaking language course at the University of Virginia. And her assignment was to do a undercover and to put to take a different spin on it. And I'm just going to read the description, which is, over the course of the week, students explored how items from everyday life can embody complex ideologies of race, gender, class, or identity. They discussed curatorial approaches that could reveal the hidden ways in which everyday interactions with these objects reinforce biases and stereotypes, and came up with creative interventions to change the negative message of each object. And I found this on a website. It's really interesting because you can sort of go in and look at the different aspects of this assignment, but it's sort of a commentary on this traditional form and how it's brought up to date, and it's a really interesting piece. And then another well-known artist, Mark Dion, has done a similar type of work, doing installations in the sort of Cabinet of Curiosities mold. A lot of his work references environmentalism. I believe many of the pieces that he uses in his work are litter that has washed up on the beach, for example. So you can see, looking at them, it's a sort of this consistency of aesthetic, but with this environmental point of view. Here's another example called The Cabinet of the Machines of Capital, and that sort of pulls in some of these other pieces. And some of these I really, having just seen them in photographs, you want to get up with them and really interact with them. So many of these are immersive pieces, and that I think is one of the things that you miss when you look at them online or you look at photographs of them. And that's one of the reasons that we were so thrilled to have Lucy come and do an installation actually in the Martha's Vineyard Museum, and just having gone through the process of watching her make this installation, going to her studio and talking with Lucy about this, it was really striking, going back and looking at the history, how she has taken this very traditional, old, ancient form almost, and brought it up to date and made it so personal. And so I do have a bunch of photographs, but I wanted to sort of treat this now as a point where maybe people might want to ask Lucy some questions. I have a question to start off the process. And that is, when Lucy, when you first started talking to us, you mentioned that you had done a similar installation elsewhere. And I was wondering about the similarities and differences of the locale and the different place that you were doing the installation, and maybe how it affected your work as it turned out. Can you give us a little bit of an insight into that?
Well, I can't really remember what I was thinking about, but various times I've done installations smaller than this, one larger, but yeah, the place always dictates what will happen in it. So this room in the museum just was perfect because it was like a real room with high ceilings. Therefore, I, piled things in, found old work that I could put high up and use the space. And other times that I've done installations, they've been smaller. Just the place, the cabinet itself that I'm using, kind of that speaks to me,
Yeah, it's so striking and immersive, and I love these botanical specimens and the the scientific artwork and the globe that isn't really it's not, if you look at it, it's not the world, it's it's one of your pieces, I believe, and the way that your artwork is spaced throughout the room. For example, the column has is that painting on it, or is that an applied paper? Can you describe exactly what that is? I know there are similar pieces there.
It's painted on a column that came from the West Tisbury dump many years ago.
That's great.
And I had made that column for a different exhibit many years ago, and then it's been kicking around.
Okay, and then so the sort of the idea of reusing things, I think, is also an interesting point, is to take the idea and put it in a different setting and it becomes a different piece.
Yes.
Which I think is also really interesting. I loved the way the sun was coming in when I took this particular shot, because it just really adds sort of mystery to the work that's in there. And you can see, though, that you have used the pieces of coral, for example, and you can see, if you go back and look at some of those old engravings, the coral is there, and the shells and the botanical specimens. There's a remarkable consistency between what you've done and the old things, and yet it is completely new and different. And I just think it's marvelous the way that it appears. And then, this piece in the corner here is another one of your painted pieces of, what is that? It's in the corner.
Well, it's wood that I covered with paper, painted paper. And it's a standing piece, 2 parts. And again, I did that a while ago. I did lots of those, different standing wooden pieces.
Yeah, and I have seen your sculpture elsewhere, and by itself and not in this setting, and it's amazing how it's transformed by its setting. And I'm sure that happens when people bring it into their homes as well. But it's very interesting to see it. It's sort of different depending on where you.
Yeah. Well, in fact, when I made things like that, I always think of them as a sort of adapting to their setting. They can be sculpture. If you hang it on a wall, it's a drawing. Or it can be an artifact, looks like a spear or something lying down flat. So,
yeah,
I know you're going to continue to ask questions. Sorry, Lucy. I just wanted to invite the audience members to ask questions in the chat or the Q&A, and I can pass those to either Bonnie or Lucy.
So when you look at something like this is on one of the walls in the room, and this is something that I think of as having been conceived as a unit, but I could be wrong. It could be that each one of those pieces was its own individual thing that you then put together once you decided to make a cabinet of curiosities. Which was it?
Well, they are individual things, but they were made to go together. You know, like these are some of the pieces in there old, and like the bird in the with the napkin ring is a thing I had as a child, and I made the box for it to go in this collection, things like that. And then the goose egg with barnacles on it was a gift from a friend, and I made a box for that. So the box thing, and then the various mushrooms, real and unreal. Again, these were all made for this particular exhibit. But then, what else is in there? But then there's a fossil-y thing, oyster shells that I've just had in the house. But I thought that went nicely in there. Anyway,
do you I think that you collect, for example, some of these things you perhaps found on the beach, and some of them you found elsewhere. I know that you showed me a vast array of broken dishes that were found when you were doing some renovations, and that you've saved. And so do you find yourself going to some of these found objects for inspiration when you are trying, does the object itself, you see it and you're like, this is something I know I'm going to do something with? Or is it both?
It's both, really. You know, those china shards, I just, I love. And I finally sorted them all out. And you saw them when they were all kind of washed and identified, as different periods. But I didn't do anything for this show. I wanted to. I was thinking of doing a china cabinet, of broken china, but I just couldn't quite figure it out.
Yeah.
Someday I will.
Okay.
Lucy, we have a question coming in from Jenny Allen asking you to talk a little bit about the letters and the tiny stones or pebbles.
Well, Jenny, I call them beach correspondence, and those letters that are lined up in the table. And it just occurred to me, I guess at one point I started arranging little stones, and they became like letters, they became like language. And then I realized it's that thing of, the communication of nature to people. And I just put it in a more formal way by having it be letters. But I do really think there's a lot of communication between people and nature, and also these inanimate things like rocks. I'm very convinced about that. So I've sort of formalized it, making language out of rocks. And also the lists, that piece that I did with kind of using sand, really small pebbles. Those are just a continuation of that idea. Is that the question answered? Or?
Here's another. Is this the one
Yep,
you're
another
saying?
question coming in from Kathy. She wants to know if you've been creating art and inspired by found objects since your childhood. And I'm particularly interested in this. I have a 4-year-old, and she's always collecting tiny pebbles, and we have sticks all over my car, all over my house. And I'll be honest, I'm usually looking for ways to get rid of them, right? And when I first walked into your show, I thought, oh my goodness, what if she's an artist collector? And I keep something of them. So we have new collections. We call it our treasure shelf in our house, and she brings things in to put on it. But yeah, if you could answer Kathy's question about your own childhood and whether you've been drawn.
Yeah, I probably didn't. I picked things up and looked at them and played with them, but I don't know that I really kept them. I didn't keep them as a collection. But I love the idea of children making their own little museums. You know, having shelves placed in the house and setting them up. But I always, even now, if I have rocks that I collect at a certain beach and I don't want them anymore, I take them back to the same place, more or less, you know, North Shore, South Shore, wherever they sort of belong. I think that's important. But with children's collections, yeah, just encourage them because they'll look at nature. We have to preserve it more and more.
Any other questions? I would like to just encourage people. I'm showing these slides. I've gone back and forth with a couple of them, but it's really an experience to actually go in the room, and I think that you need to see the place. You can sort of treat each piece as its own work of art, but I think you need to stand in the room to really experience the way that this can make you feel. And I think that that's one of the things that, you know, occasionally you'll see a work of art and you can recognize that it's technically very good, but this has a big emotional component, at least for me. And I think that it's something that is very helpful as you're going into the room to kind of be enveloped by this. And just I'd like to also mention that we have another exhibit. It's completely different, but there are resonances of the Steve Maxner exhibit that's open in the museum. It also uses natural materials to make sculpture. It's got a completely different feel, and it's a completely different it's a completely different emotion. But I think that the two exhibits really work well together, and this is a nice time that, you know, so if you came week before last, you would not have seen the Maxner exhibit, but if you come now, you can see both of them up at the same time. And I think that they talk to each other in a particular way that I think is very moving. And so I really would encourage you to come into the museum and take a look at both of them.
We have another question from Prudence Noon asking, do you make multiple prints of background paper, or do you design, or is everything a one-of-a-kind original?
Mostly original. Sometimes I use Xerox print, you know, just black and white, and then I paint it or something like that. But I think in this exhibit, it's all just ink and watercolor background.
Marco Rini has a comment more than a question. He says, thank you so very much. It's one of the most beautiful collections to experience in person.
Thank you. I have to say, I really love Steve Maxner's show, and I saw his earlier show. And it's amazing how when you write a text and have it with each piece, how it opens up so much. And I don't do that. Sometimes I think it would be more interesting if I did, to explain things. but his is so emotional, and it's just superb. People have to see it. And it's beautiful.
Well, if we don't have any other questions, I think, I just wanted.
I have one more I can read, Bonnie.
Both for, huh?
I have one more that I could read that just came
Go ahead.
from
Yeah.
Eva Plakins. She said, it's more of a comment than a question, but says, I appreciate the theme of collecting things that deal with the relationship between humans and nature, but I also think it's worth noting the nature of collecting itself, even apart from nature. For me, it's a screen, a filter, a way of bringing the entire world down to my size, a way of finding my way through the chaos, guided by the light of what I collect. Thank you for this presentation and the beautiful exhibit.
Nice.
Thank you, Ava, that's beautiful.
That's really nice. Thank you for that comment. And thank you, Lucy. The exhibit is lovely. We were working on this, we meaning you, but this was in the process for a really long time. And we were talking to you more than a year ago, I believe. And it's wonderful to see those discussions come, be turned into something so wonderful. So thank you for that. And also thank you for being part of this discussion. I think it's always nice when the artists can talk about some of their inspirations and their processes. And this was it was very interesting for me. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your illuminating talk about the history. That's so fascinating.
Yeah, and I think it almost brings it all into context for us, right? To get an understanding of what this exhibit is and where it comes from. Lucy, when you and Rez were putting up the exhibit, one of you commented that it'd be nice to have kind of a carpet. It's like the most beautiful sitting room you've ever been in. And so my final question for you is, do you have little collections like this around your home? Is this what it feels like to sit in Lucy Mitchell's sitting room with a cup of tea or a glass of tea?
No, I have to share. I have a painter husband. So, and we sort of keep our house pretty minimal as things. My studio, on the other hand, is a real nest of things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, sometimes pieces come and go out of the house. Not so much, no.
Well, again, for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, please come by the museum and see it. Bonnie, it will be up through November.
Look at the website. Sorry.
I have October 18th written down.
So there is.
That sounds more like it.
I don't know what your schedule is. You might have changed it. Doesn't matter. What is time? Right now, it's all.
There is still time. That's true. See it. So thank you all for joining us and being with us this evening. And we have more programs coming up in the future. So please, if you don't get the museum's emails, please go to our website and sign up so that you can hear about all the exciting things that we have going on. Otherwise, you can check out our website, and the upcoming programs section will let you know what we're doing, both in person. Johnny Hoy and the Bluefish are playing outside in our courtyard right now as we do this program. So we're doing a kind of combination of virtual programming and in-person programming. And we'd love to see people both on our screens and in our courtyard. So stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you, Bonnie and Lucy. And we hope to see you again soon. Okay. All right, bye folks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.